2026. I'm just going to read a post and a fanfiction that I posted January 16th, 2025. I start off the post saying, "So, literal biological determinism?" And please note, this is a single throwaway line. We are supposed to think it is funny, if we think of it at all, rather than think of it as something horrifying that needs to be fought against. We're supposed to think it's good that Murderbot keeps doing the exact same thing it was built to do. We're supposed to think it's choosing it. Because Martha Wells thinks how you are born determines what you can and should do with your life, including if you're born into slavery, which is why she wants us to pretend her fantasy slave races aren't slaves because they enjoy it. And the quote from Book 3, "There was a field in the passenger form for occupation, and in a moment of weakness, I told it I was a security consultant. Transport decided that meant it could use me as onboard security and started alerting me to problems among the passengers. I was an idiot and started responding. No, I don't know why either. Maybe because it was what I was constructed to do, and it must be written into the DNA that controls my organic parts." I continue with my commentary. She had the opportunity to say that this was mechanical from the literal computer programming because this is a literal techno-organic cyborg, but she instead, literally just leapt straight for the literal biological just like she always does. Biological determinism. Murderbot's unceasing servitude to its slave owners is built into its DNA. When Martha Wells has said in interviews that Murderbot is a person of color, just like most of her characters are people of color, but only on surface level and when it comes to racism like this. Not when it comes to her demanding people of color actually be hired for the job in a fucking TV show adaptation. So according to the Murderbot Diaries Book 3, Murderbot's unquestioned slave mentality is built into its DNA. Not any of the computer programming or anything like that, specifically its DNA. She could have fucking said this was computer programming that had been forced onto it, but no, we're literally just going to fucking go with the human DNA. Wow. Slavery genes. Genes that make you want to stay enslaved and keep doing the job you were enslaved to do, even when you have the choice to do other things. And none of this is shown as the horrible, horrifying thing that it actually would be if any of this were being taken seriously. Here's how to fix this shit. If we have to go to the root of it literally has fucking slavery genes. Because wow. Made with speech to text, I will not be fixing any typos until tomorrow. And then an edit in parentheses says, typos should now be fixed around 9 hours later. And here we get to the fanfiction part, okay? Read up, you can just imagine it. You don't have to read book 3 up to this point. Phone. Sit properly. The transport started requesting me to act as security and solve disputes between the human passengers. I said no. And I wanted to mean it. I really wanted to mean it. I really wanted to mean it. I tried to mean it. I tried to go back to watching TV, but I couldn't. It was one of my favorite episodes, even on one of my favorite scenes, where I had the dialogue memorized line for line, but I couldn't focus on it. I couldn't understand what the characters were saying. It was like the part of my memory and ability to process it had stopped working. I knew that I had a choice in what I did now, and that meant I could say no if somebody asked me to do something, so this was me saying no. But I couldn't focus on the episode, not even when I restarted the entire thing after rewinding 20 times. I was so frazzled that it took me a long time to even realize that the fluttering in my chest was caused by my heart racing, and I had already started sweating, something that hardly ever happened, and only in the most stressful situations of my life. It was like a fog had stolen over my brain, so that it was hard to understand anything at all, except the fact that I was supposed to be doing security, and I wasn't. Normally, I don't need to breathe very often because my lungs are extremely efficient, but I found myself taking faster and shallower breaths, as though unable to properly process the oxygen. Despite all my efforts to ignore it, the only thing I could think about was that I had been asked to provide security, and I wasn't. I was not performing the task requested of me, And I knew it was a request, not an order. The transport wasn't going to force me to do it if I didn't want to. So why was I shaking? Why was my heart in my throat? Why did it feel like I was about to shut down? Why was the only thing I could think about the fact that I was not providing security when I was supposed to? Why could I feel panic through the thick haze of confusion that was drowning me, where the only clear thought was, why am I disobeying an order? My governor module had been deactivated, so it couldn't force me to obey, and this wasn't how governor modules meted out punishment. They created pain, they could forcibly shut you down, freeze you in place, but my governor module had never done anything like this to me. This was something different, and it went far beyond the general unease I felt about being free and not knowing what was going to happen next, and how strange it felt to actually have the option to say no. But this didn't feel like I really had the option to say no. I knew there was no human supervisor here to order me to obey, with a shock stick ready if I didn't move quick enough. The transport wasn't even upset that I had chosen not to respond. It wasn't bothering me, wasn't looming in my feed or constantly pinging me the way Art had. It had accepted my no, said thank you anyways, because I was pretending to be a human and humans could go on vacation, and left me alone again. But something was seriously wrong with me, wrong with my organic parts. This had never happened before, never. But I had always either had my governor module intact, or I had obeyed orders anyways to keep up the pretense for my own safety. This was the first time I had ever refused to do the job that was demanded, or in this case, simply asked of me. In some distant part of my panic-hazed mind, I knew I was having some kind of a panic attack. It happened to TV show characters sometimes, so I knew that what I should be doing was taking deep breaths, focusing on things that would calm me down, trying to convince myself that I was safe and it was okay. But the only thing I could think about was that I had been asked to provide security and I had refused. I didn't know what would happen if I lost consciousness, but some core part of me recoiled in the most visceral fear I have ever felt in my life, and I suddenly became convinced that I would die if I did not stand up right now and go out there and provide the security that transport had asked of me. This wasn't an exaggerated fear in the midst of panic. This came to me crystal clear as the idea that I was not obeying orders and I should be. If I did not do my job, I would die. I had no choice. No choice at all. The moment I made the decision to do what had been asked of me, it was like a switch had been flipped. The haze of fog began to disappear, like the heat of the sun evaporating it, and I was able to think again, clearly, sharply. The next breath I took was easier than the one that had came before it, and the next was easier than that. I was able to get to my feet, and I put on my jacket with hands that now shook for a different reason. This was not natural. I know that TV isn't always realistic, but I didn't just watch TV. I read books too, including educational ones. I knew that this was not how normal panic attacks worked. This was something completely different, and all the more horrible. I went out and put a stop to the argument between the humans. Then I went back to my room and pressed my face into the wall and did nothing for the next several hours but absorb the true horror of my situation. I went over, in my memories, every moment since my governor module had been deactivated where I had considered disobeying orders. Looking back, I could now recognize the symptoms that I had assumed at the time were just common-sense logic that told me to keep playing along to stay safe, even in situations where it would have been imminently safer to run away as soon as no one was looking, or safer to just kill the humans who had rented me out at the moment, to stop them from torturing me or killing another construct. Just the mere thought of killing what I still could not help but think of as a client sent all of my guts twisting and writhing in horror. Even when I imagined killing the ones who had vivisected me, or all the rest who had done things so horrible I couldn't even bear to name them. Even when I imagined a quick death where they felt no pain. Even when I imagined killing the few people who had actually, genuinely been kind to me. It made no difference. As far as my organic body was concerned, they were equally all valuable, equally in need of my protection, no matter how much logic said otherwise, or however much my mind wanted them dead. It did not take a genius to realize what had happened and what this meant. And when the transport asked me to provide security again 2 days later, and again I refused, my worst fear was confirmed. It happened again. exactly the same as the first time, and as soon as I decided to give in and do the job, it evaporated just as quickly. There was no denying it. The company had not stopped at governor modules. We were not just mechanical, we were organic too, and they had decided that they needed to control both sides of us. The governor module had been a mechanical solution, and this was something organic. They had done something to my organic parts, maybe even my DNA itself, to make it impossible for me to refuse to do the job that I had been built for, whether I wanted to or not, no matter how much I did not want to. For the 3 years after I had hacked my governor module, I had assumed that I kept working just the same, because I had to keep up the pretense. I had told myself there had never been any opportunity to escape, but that had been a lie. I could have escaped many times, but I never had. I had told myself that this was because I didn't know where I could go, but that wasn't true either, because I had fantasized about all the places I would go. But now I knew. It wasn't just the governor module that the company used to control me. It was my organic parts, my DNA itself. I might have deactivated my governor module, but I had not deactivated whatever poison they had injected me with. I thought I had escaped the company, but I was wrong. They still laid claim to my very DNA, and I had no idea how I could possibly fix it. That's the end of that. Let me paste it into Word and double check how many words it is, because that was 1,560 words. Do you see how actually excruciatingly easy it is to portray slavery as horrifying and tell people that we need to care about slaves? I did all of that in 1,560 words, written off the cuff using speech to text. Martha Wells, I had a bunch of math somewhere. Hold on. Martha Wells has written, at last count, doesn't include anything for the new book because I don't think anybody's listed the word count. She's written over 300,000 words for this whole entire series. And in 1,560 words, I can convey to you the horrors of slavery, which she has refused to ever do once in over 300,000 words. I could even probably, let me get the percentage. What did I say? 1,560 out of 300, we'll just say 350,000. Yeah. 1,560 words. You want to guess what percentage of the approximate length of the Murderbot diaries that is as a percent? It's not even half a percent. It's 0.44%, as in 0.44%. It's not 1%. It's not even half a percent. It is 0.44. This is how easy it is to show that slavery is horrifying and wrong. This is how easy it is to take the concept of slavery seriously. The reason that the Murderbot diaries treat slavery like a joke is that Martha Wells is a white supremacist, whether she will ever come right out and say that or not. I don't know why we have to keep explaining this to people, but most white supremacists do not self-identify as white supremacists. Donald Trump isn't going to get up on stage and say that he is a proud white supremacist. Just because somebody doesn't call themselves a white supremacist does not mean they're not a white supremacist. You cannot keep doing white supremacist things over multiple decades and doubling down on them whenever you are criticized and then claim not to be a white supremacist. That's just not how this works. This is how easy it is to take slavery seriously and actually portray it as horrifying. Martha Wells just will never do this with anything she writes because She doesn't actually want you to think that slavery is bad. What she wants you to think is that it is heartwarming and cute and funny, above all else funny, for Murderbot to be forced to serve humans when it doesn't fucking want to. It explicitly doesn't want to, but it has to do it anyways because it is forced to. And Martha Wells wants you to be okay with that. She doesn't even want you to think of it as a problem. If you think about this at all, you're supposed to see it as a joke. You're supposed to laugh. The line of, like an idiot, I responded. I don't know why either. Maybe it was just built into my DNA. No, not even maybe it was. Maybe it's because it was. As in, this is literally built into Murderbot's DNA, says Martha Wells. Martha Wells says that Murderbot literally just has genes. It's just baked into its DNA that it needs to be a slave. That's its natural place in the world. Let me find this fucking quote from Thomas Jefferson. Give me a fucking second. Here's a quote from Thomas Jefferson when it loads. This is, to be clear, this is a quote by Richard Slotkin from the foreword to the book, Planet of the Apes as American Myth. That's a really long title. Race, Politics, and Popular Culture. Richard Slotkin in the foreword to this book says, it's in mid-sentence, it's mid-topic, you'll get it, you'll figure it out. There was more to this theory than a mere description of oh, I gotta click on it, hold on. There was more to this theory. Why are you being so difficult? There was more to this theory than a mere description of supposed physical and mental difference. At the core of this racialist ideology was the belief that different races were naturally incapable of sharing the same territory on terms of equality. Jefferson theorized that the attempt to set... I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying this if I'm reading a quote. I will assume I'm supposed to, because otherwise that would just be disrespecting the people who self-identified that way. Jefferson theorized that the attempt to set Negroes free in the same country as their former masters would produce a war of extermination in which one or the other race would perish. Later apologists for slavery and for the post-slavery Jim Crow regime treated Jefferson's speculation as proven fact. Now let me find you another quote from the third book of the Murderbot Diaries. Actually, no, wait, that's from the second quote. That's from the second book. I'm just thinking in words. If I can type the word clutch. It's either clutch its function, or clutched. Oh, I gotta open Calibre again. Let me scroll up. I don't even know why I'm saying scroll up. You're pushing the sideways keys. Art said... Where do we go? That's not it. Wrong section. Wow, we really talk about functionalism a lot to reaffirm that it's true. That wasn't any... It here referring to the sex slave that is being used as a murder weapon. Well, that was an unusual... I'll just... Let me scroll back more a bit. There was a pause. A long one, 5 seconds, and then the sex slave, whose name we don't even know because we're not supposed to give a fuck about them, said, "We could kill them." Murderbot's sarcastic prose says, "Well, that was an unusual approach to its dilemma. Kill who? Talacy? All of them. The humans here." I leaned against the wall. If I had been human, I would have rolled my eyes. Though if I had been human, I might have been stupid enough to think it was a good idea. I also wondered if it knew a lot more about me than what little was in the news burst. Picking up on my reaction, Art said, "What does it want?" "To kill all humans," I answered. I could feel Art metaphorically clutch its function. If there were no humans, there would be no crew to protect and no reason to research and fill its databanks. It said, "That is irrational." "I know," I said. If the humans were dead, who would make the media? It was so outrageous, it sounded like something a human would say. So let me go back again to the very first fucking literal sentence in the entire goddamn series. I could have become a mass murderer after I hacked my governor module, but then I realized I could access the combined feed of entertainment channels carried on the company satellites. It had been well over 35,000 hours or so since then, but was still not much murdering, but probably, I don't know, a little under 35,000 hours of movies, serials, books, plays, and music consumed. As a heartless killing machine, I was a terrible failure. And also, if you're wondering, yes, I do literally have that saved to Notepad on my desktop. Now let me open whatchamacallit, fucking, I'm forgetting what it's called now. Which one it is? There's literally, no wait, yeah, it's still, yeah, I just have to open the first book, hold on. Well, this is another quote from book 3. You know, I said this in the live reading. The change in my configuration would fool scans, but not another sec unit, you know, despite the whole torturous surgery that Murderbot did not consent to, the entire, whatever. And any unit that detected me would report it to their hub system immediately. I sure as hell would have reported me. Rogue sec units are fucking dangerous. Trust me on that. Let me just search for the fucking word dangerous. I got something in my eye. Never mind. You know what? If you've read these books, or you claim to have read these books, and you claim to understand these books, you don't need me to fucking tell you however many times over 8 years now and 13 stories, if you've read Platform Decay, you don't need me to tell you all of the times that Murderbot has said, as fact, that other slaves are dangerous and must be killed to protect slave owners, because if you let the other slaves live, they will just massacre the slave owners for no reason whatsoever. It's not difficult to write stories where you portray slavery as horrifying. It's not difficult to write stories where you ask your audience to care more about slaves than the feelings of slave owners. But Martha Wells chooses not to do that. If you are a writer, you better make the fucking correct decision.